Hey guys, as always, thanks for tuning in. Jay Helmsing here. Today I'm going to do the conclusion or the shooting impressions of the Springfield XDM. This is the 3.8 model, so this does have the extended full-size grip on it. It is not the compact, as you guys probably know if you watch my initial review of this gun. Overall, pretty good gun. I'm going to rate it, I'd say, probably average. It's not something that I would just rush out and buy right away. However, it is not nearly as bad as some people might make it out to be. And I say that because XD and the Springfield line kind of has this reputation of being an entry-level gun. And I definitely don't feel that this is an entry-level gun. I feel like this could hold its own against Glock or really any of the other more common guns out there. I don't feel like there's anything that you're losing by going with this platform. So I think that's kind of a misnomer or a mislabeling there of you know, what this gun's purpose is and the people who kind of carry this gun. Now, with that said, there's some things I like about it, and there's some things I don't like about it as far as shooting impressions. The things I like about the gun as far as the shooting goes is it's been just rock solid reliable. So I've not had any issues at all, any malfunctions, failure to feed, failure to extract, anything at all that would be you know, commonplace. And I put about 450, not quite 500 rounds through this gun. So you know, variety of conditions, indoor, outdoor, variety of ammunitions. It's worked flawlessly. So I can't complain on any front as far as the reliability of this gun. With that said, some things that that also impressed me about the gun are the ergonomics of it overall. It's pretty pleasant to handle, to point, and to manipulate. There, you know, I had some reservations at first about this kind of all-terrain looking grip here, but in actual shooting conditions, it's been pretty reliable, and it's been you know, pretty solid, pretty firm in my hand. Sometimes you get a really cold day, or you know, if it's wet outside or you have some dampness on your hand, it does move a little bit more than some of the more fine stippling is going to, but that said, it's locked pretty securely into your hand at all times. So I really don't have any complaints on that front, and it performed better than expected. The serrations, these are awesome. I mean, these are awesome serrations. They work well. You don't have to have a really good grip on them to work. I've never slipped off these, so that's definitely nice to see. So overall manipulations with this gun, very easy to do. Moving on to things that I also noticed about the gun that I appreciated were that I never had any shooter-induced malfunctions. So if you look at the controls on this, the way they're designed, they stay nicely out of the way. My finger, my thumb, my palm, nothing ever struck the slide release inadvertently. So that's kind of nice to see. The trigger, the design of the trigger, pretty ergonomic. I didn't have any hot spots or any issues with any of the safeties or anything getting in the way there. So again, overall, nice to see. And I'll point out also this kind of backstrap safety some people complain about. It's just sublime with me. I don't notice it there. It's nothing that I have to you know, pay attention to, engage or anything, and it just works flawlessly. So very nicely laid out gun. Now the few things that I did not really care for about the gun, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the recoil impulse. And this is obviously a shorter slided gun, so this is slightly shorter than a Glock 19 as far as the slide is concerned, and obviously with a shorter slide, shorter barrel, you typically have more recoil. So that was to be expected. However, this slide is pretty heavy, and typically on heavier slided guns, it does a pretty good job of weighting that front end and kind of giving you a little bit more weight to you know, keep the momentum from rushing the gun back. And as far as I could tell, this was a pretty snappy gun. Couple things you could attribute that to. Obviously the high bore axis. It does have a higher bore axis than a lot of striker fired pistols, even though it doesn't necessarily look like it because it's so blocky and it kind of hides it well. But if you look at where the actual striker is here in the back, it is very high up off of your hand, so definitely has some leverage up there with the high bore axis. The other thing that I would kind of attribute that to is going to be the more steep grip angle, kind of a 1911 style grip angle, as opposed to more of the laid back Glock style grip angle, which kind of gives me more of like a catcher's mitt feel where I'm catching the recoil. Definitely this is going to work against it. However, there are some guns out there that have both of those features and you don't really notice the felt recoil. One that comes to mind, the SIG P320. It also has a high bore axis, it has a high stack height, and it also has a more up and down grip angle like this. And for whatever reason, this definitely has more felt recoil than like a SIG 320 does. So, take it for what it's worth. I can't really speak on the polymer composition or anything. However, this is more of like a rubbery style polymer. So it's kind of unexpected. I really don't know what to attribute that to. But it is kind of a snappy gun to shoot, and this is obviously 9mm, so take that for what it's worth. The other thing that I never really grew into were the sights, and I do like the sights, and I like that they're using some quality fiber optics out of the box. However, the pipette here in the front is just ginormous, and I don't really care for the really big fiber optics. That's just a personal preference. But the more small fiber optics seem to work better with me. These really big ones just seem to kind of almost blind out the picture. So that really shows up in my vision. And then as far as like trying to get the alignment and all that everything done with the partridge part of the sight there, it just doesn't really work out too well for me. So again, personal preference. I think the pipette's just a little bit too big, and it is larger than you're going to see normally. However, it's more of a shrouded pipette, so maybe they needed to do that to get enough light transfer through there. The rear sight, as I mentioned before, is very tight, especially in this shorter slide here. So what I would find myself doing is sometimes I would have to fish for that perfect sight alignment and pull the trigger. Other times I would think I'd have a pretty close sight alignment because I'm used to some larger rear notches here, and I'd pull the trigger, and obviously the steel or the target wouldn't be hit like I thought it should. So a couple times that happened with me as well, and I attribute that to the sights. I think this gun overall is going to be a very accurate gun. I haven't noticed anything crazy with the grouping or anything, or having any flyers or anything like that. So I attribute that mostly to the sights and just my own personal preference. So if you don't suffer from the same preference as I do, then you're not going to have that issue. I will make a comment about the lockup of the gun. And again, it seems to be a gun built more for reliability than anything else. And I can't say anything against it in that front. It's been very solid, very reliable, and I think it's going to feed and function anything you put in it. With that said, there are some concessions that are obviously going to be made, and for this to be an XDM model, kind of more the match style, it does not have a really tight lockup. And what I mean is basically if you see the movement that I can induce, just because there's not quite, or maybe a little bit too much clearance, I should say, in there between the barrel and the slide. So it's got a fairly, I won't use the word sloppy, that sounds really bad, but there's just not a very tight lockup going on here. So as far as accuracy is concerned, it's probably going to be about average, just because the match grade barrel and some other things, some other tweaks they did. But it could be much better if Springfield would work on this lockup and just kind of working more toward the accuracy side of the gun build itself, instead of just strapping on some target sights and a nicely machined barrel and things like that, and maybe pay a little bit more attention to making it more of a match grade gun. Now that said, they have the great one on their shooting team, and I'm sure that guy is able to give them any direction that they need as far as where to take this gun. So I'm really anxious to see what the evolution of this gun is, if they have an XDM2 or if they just have Mod 2 or whatever that comes out with the XDM style. Should be a pretty nice gun, so really look forward to that. Overall, nice gun. I'd say pretty much middle of the road. This is not a gun that I would just throw out the door and say I've never used this, and it's also not a gun that I would rush out and say I'm a hardcore XDM fan at this point or an XD guy. So take it for what it's worth. Those of you out there that shoot them, carry on. Definitely a nice gun, nice piece, and it's going to serve you well, I feel like. Those of you that don't like them, maybe go check one out. I see a lot of people just blasting, and obviously on the internet you're going to get people doing a lot of talking that don't have a whole lot of hands-on experience. But get out there, feel one, experience one. If you still don't like it, that's you. But I don't really find too much that I can directly fault this gun for. So I think a lot of that kind of interpretation is a little bit blown out of proportion. Also received some comments obviously about the political slant and whatnot with Springfield and the issues that happened this year, and I try to stay completely clear of that. Obviously with my gun reviews, I try to be as neutral and as strictly involved with the gun itself, not necessarily the manufacturer. So I'll point that out. Some people are not going to buy it and not going to spend the money on Springfield because of some of the issues that happened this year. If that's you, then that's your choice. If not, then kind of look at the gun for what it is and not necessarily what the politics surrounding it are. But that's out there as well. And obviously this is a Croatian made gun, it says right on there. So take that into consideration too if you're only a supporter of American goods. This is not necessarily an American pistol, although Springfield Armory is. The gun is obviously made and engineered and whatnot in Croatia with HS. So some other things to think about. And again, I'm going to close right after I show you guys the trigger. I'll talk about probably the most redeeming feature of this gun next, and it's going to be these bad boys here. But let's check out this trigger real quick before I close off. And again, this has got 400, maybe 500 rounds through it. Trigger I haven't felt has changed all that much in that time period. It's alarmingly like it was when it came out of the box. I mean, just not a whole lot has changed. And again, I just feel these guns are fairly overbuilt from the factory, so it's kind of to be expected. But try to do this left-handed here so you guys can see it one last time. We're gonna hit a wall, fairly clean take up. We're gonna hit a wall, start sweeping through that wall, and then in that resistance there, it's going to break. There is a little bit more resistance than you'd expect out of some other polymer fired guns nowadays. I've heard this is better than the original XD trigger, but this is not what I would consider to be a match grade trigger, although it may be improved and whatnot. So just some things to think about. That's my take on the gun itself. And again, lest I remind you, 19 rounds of capacity as far as the 9mm is concerned, some pretty nicely built, polished mags that it comes with, so that's going to be hard to argue, especially in a street fight or anything if you're carrying this, where you know, putting precise shots on target is not going to be so much of a big deal with an up-close scuffle like that. 19 rounds plus more in the chamber, so 20 rounds of firepower without having to reload. There's definitely something to be said about that, with no extensions, nothing to fiddle with, nothing to break or go wrong in the magazine. So your capacity freaks out there, take notice, okay? I appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to check out my Instagram, continue to follow, like, and subscribe, and I'll keep coming at you guys with more of these reviews. As always, thank you very much.